Emancipation is finally here, the new Will Smith movie on Apple TV+. But is it actually worth watching? Is this movie gonna be Oscar #2 for Will Smith, or is this movie gonna fall flat on its face? Well, let me introduce myself, and then I'll give you my thoughts. Hey guys, my name is Brandon, aka the Brando Critic. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I really do appreciate it, and it makes me so happy that you're here. It really does. I was able to see Emancipation a little bit early for you guys, and I'm gonna give you my honest, no BS, non-spoiler review for you today and tell you if it's actually worth a watch. It's my mission to introduce you to great movies and to have a space here on YouTube that we can discuss them. So, have you guys seen Emancipation? Let me know your thoughts of the movie down in the comment section down below, and there's no right or wrong answer. It's all opinions. So if you loved it, you hated it, let me know down below. Make sure you stick around to the end so that you know my rating of the film, or else you might be going into a movie that might not be for you. So, let's begin. So Emancipation is directed by Antoine Fuqua, and he has done such films as Olympus Has Fallen, The Equalizer, Training Day, one of my favorite movies of all time. By the way, guys, if you've never seen Training Day, go watch Training Day. And the movie stars Will Smith, Ben Foster, and Charmaine Bingwa, and the story is about a runaway slave forging his way through the swamps of Louisiana to get to Lincoln's army and away from his awful plantation. So what are my thoughts on the movie? Well, when I first saw the trailer and I first saw the poster, like many people, we thought this is going to be Will Smith's second attempt at an Oscar because this is an Apple TV movie. They won for Best Picture last year with Coda. Will Smith obviously won for Best Actor last year, although we don't actually remember that night for his Oscar win. We remember it for something else. And the movie's about slavery, a true story about slavery. This movie has Oscar bait written all over it. But when I watched the movie, I found out that this movie really isn't that. This movie's actually more like First Blood, the first Rambo movie, or Apocalypto, where you have our main character who's being chased through the elements trying to escape from the villains, and they had to use their wits and their strength to survive. It's a cat and mouse story. So the presentation of this movie and the contents of this movie are at an odds with one another, and sometimes there's a disconnect there. Because it's structured like an action film, but it's presented to us like an Oscar bait, tear-jerking drama. Now, what are some things that this movie does well? I want to talk about the overall production because it really impressed me in this movie. Now, starting off with the color, you'll notice that there's not really any color in this movie. You'll think to yourself, is this a black and white movie? It looks like it from the trailer, but there is some color in this movie. There's some green in the grass. You see the red and the blue from the American flag, and the blood, although it's hard to really make out, but you do see some red in there. So there's really little color in this movie. Now, why is that? Well, it's quite obvious. It's not very subtle, but when you think about color, you think about life and love and vibrance and passion. There isn't really much of that on a plantation, especially if you're living the life of a slave on a plantation. So, to match that situation, you suck the color out of the movie. Which leads us into the cinematography, which was, in my opinion, just breathtaking. Really, it was astounding. Because there are a lot of sweeping wide shots where we see the environment of our characters. And I love this because you can tell that it's real. It's not a bunch of blue screen nonsense. And on just a personal note, when a movie has like hundreds of extras, I just really love that stuff because it feels tangible. I know that I'm not watching a bunch of CGI monsters on screen or a bunch of clone troopers on Geonosis, right? Like, I'm actually seeing people. I'm seeing the real scope of what's happening in these scenes. So for example, when we see the slaves building a railway, or we see one of the Civil War battles, we see all of these people on screen, and the brutality of it all really raises the stakes. So this movie is shot incredibly well. And the score by Marcelo Zarvos is really, really powerful. So the presentation of this movie from just a technical standpoint is just, oh man, it's really, really, really good. Another thing that this movie does very, very well, and I feel like a lot of movies really overlook this, we have to hate the villains. Now, it's an easy thing to hate the villains just from a pure morality standpoint. This movie is about slavery in the South during the Civil War. Pretty easy to get on board with the slaves because the slave owners are just the worst. But you have to see that, and you do see just extreme brutality in this movie, which of course makes us hate the villains, thus rooting for our heroes. The slaves in this movie and the slaves that were, you know, part of this real life slavery movement, they were treated like livestock, and you see it in this movie. It's a bit hard to watch in many scenes. They were thrown into chains, they were thrown into cages, they were thrown into these mass graves, and other slaves had to basically pick up their friends, their brothers, and throw them into these mass graves. They were made to beg for food like dogs. You see the slave owners burn letters into their faces. You see black people's heads on posts. It's pretty brutal stuff. Now, I will admit that we've seen graphic imagery like this before in other slave movies. However, there's two moments in this movie, or two elements of this movie, that really hit home and really make us just detest the antagonizing force. Number one is Ben Foster. Ben Foster is an extremely underrated actor, and he's played that asshole on a horse before, right? 3:10 to Yuma, great movie, by the way. So he's very good in this movie, but he has this monologue about how he was being raised on a plantation, and there was a black nanny, and he became friends with her, and he asked his dad once, hey, I forget the person's name, can this person come to dinner with us? And how the dad just really shut him down, going, well, then what? They can eat dinner with us. Then what? They're gonna steal our houses, gonna steal our jobs, steal our money, steal our food. And it just shows us how it's not necessarily a we're better than you mentality. It's them are so different, and they are to be feared. They are not to be trusted. And the second moment is when Will Smith is running through the swamps and he reaches another plantation, and a family is eating outside on the porch. And this little girl sees him in the distance, and she's like, Runna, 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 and starts ringing the bell, Runna, Runna. And she's like, Daddy, look, go get him. And that really hit me. It's just a really small scene, but it really hit me, and it really drives home the point that racism is taught. We're not born thinking this way. We are taught this from generation to generation. So it's very hard to break the cycle, if you will, especially if everyone's in their own little echo chamber. And it's not that it's a mentality of we are better than you, it's you're not even human. You have to beg for food like a dog. You are an animal. You are property. You are supposed to be belonging in chains, in cages. And it's scenes like that that really drive home that point. Because we can see, you know, slave owners treat their slaves like livestock, for sure. But hearing people talk about it from a really human perspective, that really drives home that point, and it's powerful stuff. It's just insane to think about, really it is. And of course, having all this in the movie makes us really want to root for our heroes. And again, not from a morality standpoint, just from a structure of the movie standpoint. You see your villains do horrible things and say horrible things to really understand the way that they think. From a structure standpoint, that's how you hate the villains in a movie. So really great stuff on a structural standpoint, but here are my issues with the movie. I like Will Smith. I like Will Smith a lot. Men in Black, Independence Day, are you kidding? The guy is a legend. I Am Legend too. And I like the action set pieces. There's a scene where he's fighting off an alligator. There's a scene where he's fighting off other white slave owners in like an antebellum style home. So that's all great. But the middle of the movie, for a very, very large chunk of the movie, it gets very boring. The beginning of the movie, great. Ending of the movie, fantastic. The middle, it's Will Smith walking in the woods, and it gets old really fast. And they have this really pretentious movie angle, and I've seen it before in movies, but this movie felt like it was telling Exodus again. The 10 Commandments, Prince of Egypt, where we have Will Smith as the Messiah. He's the one going to Lincoln's army, and he's going to come back and save the slaves. And he is definitely talking about how God is good, God is on our side. He's always talking to the other slaves going, God is with you, I pray for you, God is going to be with you. And when he's in the swamp, he's even walking with a big stick like Moses' staff, and he looks up into the heavens, he's like, oh, and he's talking with God, right? He's getting visions from God. I mean, he's not talking directly to him, obviously, but you hear the music, and it's very majestic, it's very biblical. And, you know, that's what he's on. He's on his Exodus journey. And, I mean, you don't really get a real sense of why Will Smith is like this. He's just, you know, the slave that we are going along this journey with. We don't really know how he knows all these tips and tricks on how to evade the dogs and how to evade all the slave owners. He just knows it, right? So he's kind of a, you know, I hate to use this term, kind of a Mary Sue. Like, we don't really understand why he knows these things, but you know, it's Will Smith, and his star power carries the movie and carries the character. But I gotta admit though, that middle part of that movie, I'm thinking, oh my God, I am bored. So that's my main problem with the movie, and I feel like if they really cleaned that up, just took out a lot of the dead weight, this movie would be really fantastic, because there's a really great movie in here, but it's bogged down by that middle. So for my overall rating, I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5, because I like this movie. I want to really like it, because I really like parts of it, but it's just that middle. That's the problem. So now you know my thoughts on Emancipation, but that still leaves you with one problem. And that is that Emancipation is a pretty split movie. So now you know my thoughts on it, But if you don't like it, what Will Smith movie are you gonna watch next? Well, believe it or not, I actually do have a review for King Richard, the movie that he won the Oscar for last year, which is a much better movie than this one. So on the end screen, click that video and you'll know my thoughts on King Richard, because that's the movie that you want to watch. So thank you for sticking with me to the end of the video. I really do appreciate it. If you like this video and you want to see more videos just like it, then hit like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support the channel, then I suggest joining my Patreon. The link is down below in the description. We watch movies every single month together, and I give you guys movies every single month. So that interests you, then definitely join my Patreon. Link is down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in that next video. King Richard, end screen's right there, and I'll see you there. Take care.